Welcome to my autobiography. I'm Dianne Tyers, and I'm going to focus my autobiography not so much on my career and the key points of my work as a language teacher. I'm going to focus on being a language teacher trainer, which is what I've actually been doing for the last 20 years. So I'm going to walk you through all of the key questions and concepts we were asked to address in our autobiography from the perspective of a language trainer or a language educator. Just to give you a quick background overview for my career as a language trainer or a language educator, I started training teachers way back in 1993 when I was promoted to a position overseeing foreign language teachers or the English-speaking teachers for a large language school chain in Japan. So I had all of northern Japan as my territory, and I had 24 schools for which I looked after the foreign teachers, as they were called, or the gaijin teachers. And this constituted 56 different teachers. Most of them were from Canada and the US, but we had a few from Australia and also a few from the UK. And from that position, I moved on to do my master's degree in second language teacher education from a perspective of language and culture. And then I moved back to Canada and was based in Toronto and took on a regional management position where I was supervising all of the operations, so all the aspects of 6 different language schools. I had one in Toronto, I had 2 in Boston, 2 in New York, and 1 in Chicago. So I spent a lot of time on airplanes. And then from there I moved on to do quality control for a K-12 franchising organization. And so I shifted a little bit away from the teacher training there, but I was still working with franchisees to get their teachers performing at an optimum level. And then 12 years ago, I started my own company and chose to focus on English language teacher training because that was my passion and still is my passion. So that's kind of how I've transitioned to get into the place that I'm currently at, running. We are actually Canada's leading provider of English language teacher training, and we train teachers right across Canada and also a lot of different international groups, either by having those groups come into Canada or by sending our trainers internationally. So that's where I am, and I'll dig right into the autobiography from here. So a metaphor that I always keep in mind with second language teacher education and teacher training is the metaphor of a coach. This is the one that really suits the approach that we take to training teachers. A coach is kind of in the background doing all of the strategizing and the cheering and the supporting and the motivating, and also providing all of the feedback. And then the teachers that we're training are in the forefront. They're working with the students and learning how to teach and to plan lessons and use materials and so on. So I very much use the metaphor of coach when it comes to teacher training. It is not the role of the coach to be front and center and commanding and directing and so on. It's the role of a coach to be the background person, really getting players, in this case the teachers or the trainee teachers, to be the best that they can possibly be at what they do. We use a lot of negotiation of meaning with our trainee teachers. What we don't want to do is have this cookie cutter production line of teachers, so we don't force them into a mold and then send them out the door to teach English as a second language or English as a foreign language. What we really try to do is to help them take their own personal style and all of their background experience and mold that into a successful and unique teaching style. So that we try to create each trainee teachers as a unique teacher and give them the tools to fully exploit their own personality and background experience to be the best that they can be. So we do a lot of negotiating in terms of, what is the best lesson plan for this particular situation, and how can you, as the particular unique individual you are, deliver this lesson plan. And we give a lot of feedback with the same idea in mind. So we get them to tweak their personal teaching style and figure out, okay, this is kind of what I need to accomplish, and how do I accomplish that as the person that I am. So there's a lot of negotiating back and forth between our perspectives of what we see when they're trying to deliver their lessons, and then their perspective of internally what were they trying to do, and how were they trying to represent themselves, and how were they actually trying to teach. So what does it mean to be a successful second language teacher educator or a teacher trainer? For me, it really, success is all about helping each of our trainees become the most effective teacher that they can be based on who they are and what they bring to the table in terms of life experience. So to see different teacher trainees discover the teacher within, that's what I really see as us being successful And that's what brings me the rewards. When I see someone who, for example, might be very introverted and thinks, oh, I'll never be a teacher because I'm introverted. When we see that person start to discover, well, actually, I do have a lot of natural teaching ability that I can bring to the table, and it doesn't matter whether I'm introverted or extroverted, or whether English is my first language or my second language. When we see trainee teachers really start to discover who they are as teachers, I can't tell you how unbelievably rewarding that is. And so that to me is success, is when we can send teachers out the door after the last day of class and send them being confident in who they are as a teacher, and send them off to build really good, fun and rewarding careers for themselves as language teachers. So we've got, our graduates are working all over the world. Some of them now are even running programs. They're developing curriculum. They're leading projects into developing countries. So it just brings me so much satisfaction to see where people go with the courses and with the instruction and the help that we give them to become language teachers. So that to me is how I define success. There are 3 key maxims or concepts that we keep in mind with all of our teacher training courses, both when we're delivering them and when we're actually developing them in the first place. The first of these is one that we capture with the tagline for our company, and that is the practice of teaching. So what we try to do with all of our courses is take the most current theory about language education and language teaching and language learning, and then we try to turn it into good solid practice. So we try always to bridge this gap between theory and practice, because it's no good just to give trainee teachers theory. They walk out the door knowing lots of stuff, but it doesn't affect their ability in the classroom. So all of our activities are designed to bridge this theory-practice gap that often exists when it comes to teaching, because that is the challenge of teaching, is taking what we know and translating it into good educational practice. So the practice of teaching is how we encapsulate everything we're trying to do with our courses. Here's the current theory, and then how do we put that into practice in our classrooms? The second maxim or concept that we always keep in mind when we're both developing and delivering our teacher training courses is the idea that teachers, and particularly language teachers, are what we call strategic decision makers. Teaching is all about making decisions. There was an interesting piece of research that I read, and I confess I can't remember who did this piece of research, but it's really stuck in my head. The concept of it is that in a given hour, a teacher will make 600 decisions. So that's about 10 decisions a minute. That's a lot of decision making. But when you start to break it down, you really see where this number comes from. So teachers are making decisions about when to start an activity, when to finish an activity, when to correct a student's errors, when not to correct a student's errors. If they are going to correct, how are they going to correct? Which activities to use or which materials to use for a particular activity. Is the material working? No, then I have to change it. Which students am I going to have work together? That's not working. Do I need to change my groupings? And so on. So teachers are always making decisions, and they're just making decisions like this. So one of the things we always do in all of our courses is point out to teachers the strategic decisions that they have to make as they're both planning and delivering their lessons. So from a lesson planning perspective, with every activity that teachers plan, we make sure they think through, why am I using this activity? What's my purpose with it? What outcome am I going for? And then when they're delivering, we walk through all of the instantaneous decisions that they need to make as they're delivering their lessons. So our discussions always focus around strategically what makes sense at this particular point in time or for this particular lesson. So everything, and I mean everything, is geared towards making teachers strategic decision makers. Our teachers always know why they're doing what they're doing. The third maxim or concept that we always keep in mind when developing and delivering our teacher training courses is the idea that we want to provide teachers with a standard set of skills and a standard set of knowledge. And then once they've got that, then they can branch out and layer on their individuality and their uniqueness. So we always start with a standard foundation. And not everyone agrees with this, but we start with the idea that in order to break rules, in order to be that unique individual teacher, you actually have to know what the rules are in the first place. And we draw this from standard art instructions. So in order to break the rules when you're creating a piece of art, you have to know what those rules are. So you have to know color theory, you have to know how your different media are going to behave when you do different things to them. So in order to break the rules, you have to know the rules. So we always start with, this is the standard foundation, or the standard set of skills and guidelines and rules that you need to understand as a language teacher, and then take those rules and integrate them and personalize them, make them your own, and develop your own unique teaching style from there. So that is always our starting point. What's the standard foundation that teachers need? How do we give them that foundation so that they can then become unique teachers? There are 3 milestones that really stand out when I look back on my career that got me to the point where I'm at now, which is running a teacher training company. And the first one of these was 20 years ago when I was working in Japan, and I'd been a language teacher there for about 1.5 years, and I was offered the position of English language teacher, trainer, and manager for the northern division of this particular company. So I moved up to Sapporo, which is on the northern island of Hokkaido, and I took over responsibility for 56 English language teachers from Canada, the United States, Australia, and the UK. And I was responsible for their initial training and their 1-year training, all the ongoing support, ongoing observations, and their promotions. And I was also responsible for all the troubleshooting that goes with running this type of organization where you've got international people working in a Japanese context. You get a lot of miscommunication cross-culturally and so on. And then over time, I took on responsibility for also training the Japanese teachers of English and working with the Japanese managers on their cross-cultural communication skills as well. So this was a crazy job. Like, I can't even begin to describe how crazy it was. I was traveling 3 weeks out of every 4 weeks. I would literally get home, throw my clothes in the washer and dryer, pack them up again, and catch the next train or catch the next plane. So I was traveling all over northern Japan, and then we also had to go down to Tokyo and Osaka for meetings, and the travel was intense, and just the responsibility was intense because I had 56 teachers, all at different stages of their careers. So some of them had just arrived in Japan, and some of them had been there for 2, 3, and 4 years. So I had this whole range of career points that these different teachers were at, and a whole range of personalities, and a whole range of abilities to adapt to and thrive in the Japanese culture. So it was a crazy job, and my learning curve was just like this. I just learned so much every day. Very, very stressful, but an unbelievable learning experience, and that is what launched me on my career as an English language teacher trainer. The next milestone in my career was after I had finished my master's degree down in Australia. I went to the hottest place I could find to do my master's in applied linguistics, and that was Brisbane, Australia. Once I finished that, I relocated back to Toronto. It was my first time back in Canada for about 8 years. And I took a job with another large chain of language schools, and this time it was a global chain, and they had about, at the time I think they had 23 schools all over the world. The majority of those were in North America, and so they were hiring regional managers. So I got the position for the regional manager, to be the regional manager in the northeast corner of North America. So I had the school in Toronto that was my home base, and then I had a school in Chicago, 2 schools in Boston, and 2 schools in New York. And I wasn't just responsible for the teachers in these schools, I was responsible for everything. So this was a huge milestone because it helped me to understand that language teaching is much more than what goes on in the classroom. Language teaching is the entire set of services and the entire experience that goes with learning another language. So I was responsible for student accommodation, so I supervised homestay programs and college-based campus dormitory programs. I supervised group bookings, so we were responsible for the group experiences. We would have groups of up to 30 or 40 kids come in at any one time. Also responsible for the budget, because if you want to teach a language, the money has to come from somewhere, and you can't spend more than you're bringing in. So I learned a lot about budgeting. I was also responsible for the human resources side of things, so all of the hiring, the performance management, the firing. And I wasn't responsible for the marketing, but I did learn a lot about marketing and sales, working with agents and everything like that. So I had directors at each of those schools reporting to me. We had 2 directors in each schools. So I had 12 direct reports, and then I was indirectly responsible for all of the teaching staff and the accommodation staff and the activities staff that reported into those directors. So it was an enormous learning curve in terms of the entire big picture of how the language education sector works. And once again, it was a crazy job. I was on the road not 3 weeks out of 4, but actually 4 weeks out of 4. So I had an even shorter turnaround time in terms of getting my clothes clean and packing them up again. And I caught many 6 a.m. flights down into the States, getting up at 4 a.m. in the middle of winter. That was not fun, let me tell you that. I got stuck in lots of snowstorms and bad weather and crazy mechanical failures on planes and things like that. So, but it was, once again, an unbelievable learning experience because it did give me that big picture of the language education sector. And we managed to take this company that we were working for from, it was originally a privately owned company, and then it was purchased by a publicly traded company. And so we had to transition all of the systems from a private type business system over to a publicly held type business system. And so there was a huge learning curve for me there as well in terms of different business models that go along with the education sector. So all in all, a totally crazy but totally rewarding experience. And the final milestone in my career to get me to where I am now as a language teacher trainer and running a language education company is making the decision to actually start my own company. And I started it part-time 12 years ago, so in January 2001, and then I moved into it full-time in August 2003. So we've just hit the 10-year mark of having this company be a full-time operation. And I made the decision to create my own company because I had reached kind of it's not really a glass ceiling, it's kind of an interesting ceiling within or education organizations. I call it a combination of the US-Canada ceiling in that the majority of large private education companies are actually US-based. So to move higher in the organization, you have to move down to the United States, which I didn't want to do at that point in time. My family's here. And then the other ceiling I hit was what I call the authenticity ceiling. And this ceiling is one that in order to move up in a large corporation, you really have to buy into the party line and follow what the company says, and you can't question. You just have to really do what you're told, kind of thing. And that's just not me as a person. I'm rather outspoken and just a little bit independent. So I reached as high as I could in a large corporate model, and I realized to do what I really want to do and what I'm passionate about, which is language teacher education, the best route for me is to just move out on my own. So I did that in 2003 full-time once I had completed my MBA. And it was a really scary decision because I was leaving behind a solid paycheck that I knew was going to come every week or every 2 weeks, and a benefits package and a lot of really fun and interesting travel. And I was leaving behind really good colleagues. So it was a pretty scary proposition just to launch yourself out and to try something that no one had ever tried before. But I did it anyway. And it's been a pretty insane roller coaster ride. I've had, moments of great success and moments that were very rewarding. And then, to be quite honest, I've had moments of utter despair where I was literally holding on by my fingernails just to keep going with this company. But making the decision to start that company really was a milestone. And I'm really happy with where we're at now, knock on wood. I don't want to jinx it in any way. But we've got a very solid suite of teacher training programs out there. We've got 10 great partnerships right across Canada with colleges and universities and school boards and private language schools and nonprofit organizations. So we work with all of these partners to deliver our teacher training courses. We've got trainers that we send internationally on both for-profit and nonprofit projects. We've got groups of teachers that come into Canada to do our teacher training programs. And we're just starting to really look, how do we expand even more internationally? So we're having a lot of fun going to conferences internationally to start to promote our teacher training courses. So that's where we've gotten to. It's been a really, I use the word crazy a lot, but it has been a crazy ride with this teacher training company. But We've launched a lot of teaching careers and helped a lot of people get on their feet, and helped a lot of people get promoted in their jobs and move up into management and training positions themselves. So that's another milestone and a very significant one that brought me to where I am today. I've had lots, and I do mean lots, of critical incidents throughout my career as a language teacher, trainer, and also as a business owner that have really forced me to think about language education in a different way. I don't have time to share all of them, obviously, but I will pick two of the ones that really stand out. So the first one was an event that took place in Japan when I was a language teacher, trainer, and manager up in northern Japan. And one of my jobs was also to work with the Japanese managers of these different schools and just help them communicate more effectively with the English teachers in their schools, and also help them to sell the programs to the students. And one of my roles, I thought, was to encourage these managers and to just keep them, let them know when they were doing a good job and let them know kind of what they needed to work on and fine tune to be better at managing their schools. And so with this one particular manager who'd been struggling a lot, but really did manage to turn her performance around, I gave her positive feedback. I said, you're doing an awesome job. I'm really impressed with how you've turned things around in this school, and the teachers have told me lots of good things about you, and they're really happy with where things are at. And, I saw that as my job, to give positive feedback when it was merited. I went back to my office and I got my butt kicked. Excuse the language, but there's no other word to describe it. I was yelled at, don't you dare give positive feedback to the Japanese managers, because if they get positive feedback, then they'll get comfortable and complacent and they won't try so hard, and we just want them to keep trying and trying and trying. So we never let them know that they've done a good job. We never do that kind of positive feedback with them. And I was just left stunned, because to my mind, every human being needs positive feedback to encourage them to keep going and just to let them know, hey, somebody's recognized that you've done a good job. So I was left stunned after getting yelled at because I had dared to give a Japanese manager positive feedback. And that really started me thinking and started me noticing that I was hitting all of these what I call invisible walls. And not just in terms of management, but also in terms of what is good teaching, what do we expect of our students, what do we expect of our teachers. And I called them these invisible walls because I had no other words for them at the time. And what I did is I started to notice more and more of these invisible walls that we were hitting, and I was trying to figure out, well, what's going on here? Why are we operating from such different, and I do mean different, values assumptions about how we should be doing our jobs? I then took this concept of invisible walls down to Australia when I was doing my master's degree, and I started to investigate it and put a name to it. And the invisible walls obviously were culture. And so I started to realize that there's just this unbelievable connection between language and culture. And you can't learn a language without learning the culture. And you can't function in another language without also using or needing to know that other culture that goes with the language. And so I tailored my master's thesis around this interconnection of language and culture. And this has been a passion of mine when it comes to language education from there on in. So whenever I get the chance, I create presentations about this language culture connection. I'm working on a book on the language culture connection, and this connection is built into all of our teacher training courses. So at every opportunity we have to show teachers that these two pieces are totally interconnected, we take that opportunity in our courses. So that was definitely a critical incident for me. It opened my eyes to the fact that there were these invisible cultural walls that we needed to know about in order to be successful in language education. The second critical incident that I'll walk you through is one that I experienced when I was working for this global language company, and I was the regional manager with the 6 schools in Toronto and New York and so on. And this one's not directly related to language education, but it really did form my approach to any project that I take on, including developing teacher training courses and anything that is project-based. And when we took on these regional management roles, there was myself and 3 other colleagues, and we inherited this company that was transitioning from being a privately owned company to a publicly owned company. And when you move from private to public in terms of company ownership, there's a whole different set of rules and procedures that you have to put in place. And it was just an agonizing process going from this private set of rules and processes and procedures to this publicly funded or publicly traded set of rules and processes and procedures. And we got to the point where the entire organization basically just ground to a halt, and bills weren't getting paid. Nothing was getting done. It was just complete chaos. And what we all realized is that there was no patchworking that we could do here. There was no band-aiding. There was no shortcut. We had to go right back to the beginning of how this organization functioned at the school level and at the head office level. And we had to start rebuilding right from ground zero. There was no way that we could band-aid this or anything. So we stripped back our school processes and procedures and our head office processes and procedures right back to ground zero. And then we rebuilt them and put in the procedures we had to have for the type of organization that we were becoming. And this was a project or a process that took us a year and a half to complete. And once we got to the end of that year and a half, we had a very smoothly functioning organization. And we had good systems and procedures. Our schools were moving smoothly and functioning smoothly, and our students were happy, our teachers were happy. But it took a year and a half of 60 and 70-hour weeks on the part of a team. There were about 6 or 7 of us who really participated in this process. And why this was a critical incident was that it made me realize that no matter what you approach, any project, whether it's revising something or building something from scratch, you always have to go back to ground zero. You can't band-aid stuff, and you can't do a patchwork and put things together. You always have to start from the ground and build up, and there's just no shortcuts. So this was a huge learning curve for me, because prior to this set of regional managers coming on board, the company was trying to shortcut and band-aid and stuff like that, and you can't. So this was a huge learning curve for me in terms of how you approach any project. Is you start from zero and you build upwards. There are no shortcuts. We have practicums built into 2 of our teacher training courses, and these are our 2 foundational courses. One is a course that meets TESOL Canada Standard 1 certification for English teachers, and one is a course that meets TESOL Ontario certification requirements and TESOL Canada Standard 2 requirements. And for both of these accrediting systems, a practicum is central to the courses that we build. So one of them has a 20-hour practicum and one of them has a 30-hour practicum. And it's been really interesting, because when we initially designed these courses, we're like, yeah, we have to add a practicum on board. Let's get some teachers involved and have them be mentors, and let's just add this on to the coursework. And our idea was that the coursework was the most important piece of our courses. But over the years, we've learned that practicums actually constitute a very significant piece of a foundational teacher training course, because practicums help participants make it real. So as teacher trainers, we know what teaching looks like. We know what good ESL teaching looks like. We know what good EFL teaching looks like. But our trainees are coming into this with no experience at all in English language teaching. And so we can tell them all we want about what good teaching looks like, but until they see it in action with real teachers and real students, they just don't get the idea of what it is that they're training to do. So we've realized over the years that this practicum piece is a very significant piece of what we offer with our teacher training courses. And so we've tried to build in, over time, different ways to exploit this experience from a learning perspective. So we've built in observation reports and reflection reports, and different levels of feedback that they receive from their practicum supervisors, and different types of directed observation. And we've just started experimenting with having a practicum feedback debriefing session, where we bring all of the practicum students back and have them go through very specific activities that help them share and consolidate their practicum learning experiences. We've done this in an informal way by just having 5 or 10 minutes of each class devoted to talking about the practicums, but we've moved towards just trying or experimenting with this more formal practicum debrief approach to further integrate the practicums into our coursework. So over time, we've just come to realize how significant that practicum piece is for making teaching real to new teachers. The other thing I want to say about practicums is from the perspective of managing practicums and pairing student teachers up with practicum teachers or associate teachers or mentor instructors, whatever label you want to put on it. The big challenge is really ensuring that practicum students get consistent experiences so that when they start to compare, well, I did this and I did this, they don't find a lot of differences. And this is an ongoing challenge, and we've tried to make practicum experiences more consistent by having very consistent and well-documented processes that both students and teachers are made aware of. We've created training videos for our practicum supervisors so that they know exactly how these practicums are supposed to unfold. We've created troubleshooting videos so that practicum supervisors kind of get a heads up about challenges that might arise during the practicum experience and giving them ideas for how to deal with these challenges when they do arise. So this is an ongoing challenge. We want all of our trainee teachers to have a good, solid practicum experience, but trying to get that consistency in place is something that we continue to work on, and we will continue to work on, I think, as long as we run these courses. Our whole network of teacher training is based upon partnerships that we form with universities and colleges, school boards, private language schools, and nonprofit organizations. So my company creates the teacher training courseware, and then we have train the trainer programs. We go out into these partner organizations and we train their staff to be trainers of our courses. And then we do ongoing quality control and work with them on an ongoing basis to make sure that the courses are delivered up to the standard that we expect and to the standard that we advertise and the standard we're accredited for. So partnerships are a fundamental piece of our teacher training model. And we also form partnerships with the trainers that we work with because everyone's invested in the success of these teacher training courses. So I've learned a few things about partnerships over the years. They remain one of the most challenging things, but also one of the most rewarding things about running the courses the way that we run them. The first thing that I had to learn was to let go. I had to realize that every trainer and every organization is not going to run the teacher training courses that I've designed exactly the way I want them to run or exactly the way I would do it. So I had to, these were my babies, these courses that I spent hours and hours developing. And they're very detailed in terms of the material that's provided. But I had to learn to let that go and realize that different trainers and different organizations were going to implement these courses slightly differently. And so I had to realize for myself, okay, what's the core piece of this course that has to be done exactly the same no matter the location? And then what are the pieces where there can be a little bit of variation? Then the other thing I had to do was to very, very clearly articulate my expectations for how these courses were to be run and what the outcomes were. And I had to clearly articulate the instructions for every aspect of the course. So trainers and partners, when they're running our courses, they get, trainers get a 200 to 300 page trainer manual, and students get a manual, and then there's an operations manual to teach the locations how to run these courses. We provide all of the documentation they need to run them. So that was the other thing that I really learned about partnerships is I had to be super clear about what I wanted and how I envisioned things running, because if I didn't have that clarity, then I couldn't communicate it to the partners. And then the third thing I've learned about partnerships is that it's just really fun to get different perspectives on teacher training. Because if I were the only person running our teacher training courses, we would only have my perspective on what teacher training is and what good teacher training looks like. But because we work with so many organizations and we have at any point in time up to 50 trainers running our courses, we get all of these 50 or 60 perspectives on what good language teacher training looks like. And so we have awesome discussions whenever we get on the phone or when we meet at conferences or when I visit sites. We have awesome discussions about what good language teacher training is. And we dig into our courses and we tweak things and we're like, well, I see it this way and I see it this way and I've had this experience and I've had this experience. So we're constantly talking about what is good teacher training and what is good language teaching. And so that's a hugely rewarding piece about having so many partnerships and so many good partnerships. I love the partners we work with, and we just delve into the topic or the issues around language teacher training every time we meet. We have crazy conversations, and anyone listening would think, these people are from another planet, but it's lots of fun and it keeps us passionate about what we do. I live and breathe language. I'm so passionate about language, and not just the English language, but language itself. And I love hearing different languages, even if I can't understand them. I just enjoy the beauty of what different languages sound like and the amazing creative things human beings as a species have done with language. So I'm a self-confessed language geek. So things that I do to, exercise my passion about language is I do a lot of reading just about the concept of language itself. So right now I'm working through a lot of the works by David Crystal. So he's done some really fun stuff about the origin of different words, the origin of the English language, and so on. And then once I'm done with him, the next on my reading list is Steven Pinker. He's done a lot of work on the psychology of language. So I'm really looking forward to delving into his work. The other thing I do is I leave myself open to language learning experiences whenever possible. So whenever I travel, I try to learn even just a few words of the local language. It's really good to remind ourselves once in a while as to what it feels like to be a language learner as opposed to a language teacher. And it's very humbling when we're in the language learner position because we realize just how difficult it is to learn a language. Then the other thing I do is I present as much as possible on different topics to do with language education and language and culture. That's my other favorite topic. So whenever possible, I get in front of audiences and present what I know and then learn what they know. So we have really good exchanges. So I present right across Canada on different language topics, and I'm always learning from those presentations and from my audiences. Then the other thing I do for fun is I take different classes, just continuing education classes offered by local colleges and so on, that have to do with either language or communication. So recently I took an acting class, just an introductory acting class to really look at delivery of language and articulating language very clearly. I've taken improv classes because that forces you to use language very spontaneously. So I just take any continuing education classes I can that delve me into different aspects of language that I don't always work with on a daily basis. It's hard for me to describe one situation in which I've mentored teachers or supervised teachers because I do that all the time. This is my work. And I mentor both brand new teachers, and I mentor experienced teachers, and I mentor teacher trainers, I mentor curriculum developers. That's just my role in terms of where I'm at with my company and with my career right now. So I'm just going to speak generally about the mentoring process. It's a process that I love because it's always good to see the profession of language teaching and language education through another set of eyes. And when I'm in the process of sharing what I know, that forces me to articulate my knowledge and organize it in a communicable way. And when I hear the perspective of a new teacher, that always refreshes me and gives me a brand new perspective on the profession. And when I hear the perspective of an experienced teacher, I get to see another way of looking at things based on their experience. And when I get a perspective of a teacher trainer, once again, it's a new set of eyes on this whole body of language education knowledge that we're trying to articulate and trying to share with our teachers. So mentoring instructors is hugely rewarding, and it's a process that keeps language education fresh for me. I never get tired of language education and training teachers because every new person that comes into our courses and every new teacher that I work with brings new information and new ways of looking at things to me, and it always keeps it fresh. The central teacher development strategy that I advocate and use all the time is making this bridge between theory and practice. So I've said this before, but I will say it again. There's no point in having all of this theory if it doesn't somehow impact what we do in the real classroom. So all of our teacher development courses and workshops and seminars and presentations, everything we do relates to taking this theory and making it real in the classroom. Another thing that I'm a big advocate of is a discovery-based approach to teacher development, and that is where we give teachers a little bit of information about something, but then we put them through activities that help them discover how to apply it or the real usefulness of that piece of information. So discovery activities are huge in my mind. And then related to that are strategies that are experiential. So whenever we can put teachers in real situations or situations that are as real as possible, then we're going to see a lot of teacher development going on. So those are my main strategies for teacher development that I rely on. The type of facilitator I am really goes back to the metaphor I use for training teachers, and that is being a coach. We always need to start with where people are at a given point in time. So at the start of any training course or seminar or workshop, I always start where are we now? What do you know now? And then we paint a picture of where we need to get the teachers to. And then we put teachers through a series of activities so that they can get themselves there on their own and under their own steam. So I'm very much this facilitator who takes a coaching role and an encouraging role and meets people where they're at right now and helps them get where they need to go. So it's all about the people I'm working with. It's not about me by any means. Thanks very much for joining me as I've explored my beliefs about second language teacher education and English language teacher training, whatever terminology you want to put on it. And it's been really interesting for me to kind of walk myself through the journey I've been on to get to where I am right now and to articulate what I believe right now about language teacher education. So I hope you've enjoyed watching and listening as much as I've enjoyed producing this. Thanks very much.